Democracy is not a spectator sport. This is a favorite slogan of the League of Women Voters, a group begun 90 years ago to help educate newly enfranchised women who had finally won the right to vote. Today, the League in Lexington continues to inform citizens about public policy through their voter information programs and other activities. All are welcome at the League's First Friday forums featuring programs of interest to residents. Topics range from Lexington's biotech companies to the town's changing demographics to helping our youth at risk. The Lexington League of Women Voters welcomes your interest and participation. For more information about membership and programs, please visit our website.
First of all, I want to welcome all of you here this morning to hear our new town manager, Jim Malloy. I am Margaret Copey. I am the convener of the Lexington League of Women Voters. The League of Women Voters is a nonpartisan organization dedicated to the principles of self-government established in the Constitution of the United States. The League works to promote political responsibility through informed and active participation of citizens in government, and we never support political parties or candidates. So just clear up who we are. I'm going to welcome Jim Malloy here today. Jim is I'm reading all of this off of my phone here. He was voted on August 23rd, 2018. The Lexington Board of Selectmen voted for James Malloy as Lexington's fifth town manager, succeeding Carl Valenti, who had held the position for 13 years. Mr. Malloy comes to Lexington having held leading positions in several towns, including Westboro, where he was the town manager since 2009, Sturbridge, where he was the town administrator, as well as communities in New York and Colorado. And with that, I'll let him tell you what he wants to tell you about himself. Welcome, Mr. Malloy.
Thank you. I think this is on, right? Can you hear me? Soft. A little bit more? Better? Okay. Is there a volume?
Back here.
I will learn all of this. Is that better?
I don't think it's working.
No? I don't know if it's working. If it doesn't end up working, I'll just talk really loud.
Well, we want you on tape.
Oh, it's being recorded. Okay. Well, hopefully it's working.
Here.
Well, okay. I'll try to talk as close to it.
There
we go. That's I get as close to this as I can. All right. So I find typically when I come to a group like this that more often than not, people want to ask me questions than listen to me speak too much. So I'll briefly, Margaret hit on a little bit on my career, but I was asked to speak about several very specific items, and so I'll hit on those and then just open it up to questions. So the first one was on the structure of government. I think most people know Lexington has a selectman, town manager, representative town meeting form of government. It's the rules are pretty much dictated by the Selectmen Town Manager Act and our Representative Town Meeting Act. Doesn't get changed very often. In order to change it, it requires a legislative action. This year we're actually looking at making a change to the Selectmen Town Manager Act, and that is to change the phrase selectmen to select board, to make it, to make it gender neutral. And so that actually requires a town meeting vote. Then it has to go to the legislature, so it'll probably take 6 months to get it done. It'll take us a couple weeks, but it'll take the legislature a long time. And so it's done that way on purpose so that willy-nilly you can't change the local government. You know, if you get somebody in who doesn't like something in particular, it's not just a town meeting vote to change it, it's a legislative action that really requires a change. And so it's a long process, and it's done that way on purpose so that the structure of government stays the same for the most part. So the Board of Selectmen serve as the chief policy setting board for the town. and in some respects are the chief executive officer, and in some respects we share some chief executive officer duties, and then I'm also the chief administrative officer. And so that's basically the structure of government. The way Lexington is set up is a little bit different than a lot of communities. It has a upper senior management team that's made up of the 3 assistant town managers. One is an overall assistant town manager, and then there's an assistant town manager for community development and an assistant town manager for finance. And then there's the police chief, fire chief, public works director, human services director, library director, and several other positions that make up the senior management team. And then a lot of the department heads.
Could you speak closer to the microphone?
Okay, I'll get as close as I can. I feel like I'm about to eat it. Yeah, you have to be very close to it. And so that pretty much makes up the senior management team. And then there are a group of department heads like the treasurer, collector, chief assessor, conservation director that are all middle level managers, whereas in a lot of other communities those are also considered department heads. But if you were to have all of those as the department heads here in Lexington, we would probably have unwieldy department head meetings because we just simply have too many people there. And so one of the changes that I'm making is actually we have a senior management team meeting every 2 weeks, and the previous town manager didn't bring in the middle management team, and so what I'm doing is once a quarter I'm having a joint senior management team, middle management team meeting. So then the next thing I was asked to talk about is how the town manager relates to the Board of Selectmen. And so one of the most important things between the board and I, obviously, is that we're on the same page. They set policy. My role is to advise them when it comes to policy, but then when they make a decision, my role is to make sure that I carry out that policy and that our staff carries out the policy to the very best of our ability. It's not my job, if they decide to do something that I disagree with for whatever reason, for me to thwart that. It would be unethical for me to do that, actually, under what ICMA's Code of Ethics, and that's the International City County Management Association, has a code of ethics which differentiates local government professional managers, don't take this the wrong way, Joe, from politicians, because there are politicians that get involved in local government and they don't necessarily adhere to the code of ethics that professional local government managers do. So they have obviously policy direction. I'm in charge of the daily administration of the town. The board sets goals, does strategic planning, and one of the things that I've felt that over the years I've been very good at doing with the boards that I've worked for is really helping them become more efficient in what they do so that they have the opportunity to really look at strategic issues and work towards where the community should be years from now, and not necessarily worrying so much about the day-to-day issues. It's where do we want to be, not what are we doing now. So the other thing is, as the board sets goals, then my role is to coordinate with all of the departments to make sure that those goals are accomplished. And we communicate in a lot of different ways thanks to technology. We use the telephone when it's a real emergency, text messages when it's something that we really want to get out quickly, and then email, which is both a blessing and a sin, not just because of the volume, but because of the open meeting law. So email is a great way for me to get the same information to every single member of the Board of Selectmen at the same exact time, delivered simultaneously. The sin is if they start replying and it's on a policy issue, and then we've violated the open meeting law. So a lot of times when I send emails out, I always say, if you have a question about this, please contact me directly. You know, I don't want them to hit reply all, because once they hit reply all, it creates a problem. And the board here, I think, is very cognizant of that, and they are very good about making sure that they don't violate the open meeting law, which has not always been my experience with some elected officials. Even when I say, don't hit reply all, the first thing that happens, someone hits reply all, and then they tell you what their position is on something. And then the other selectmen pipe in and say, please don't do that. Didn't you see it said, don't hit reply all? So the next thing I was asked to speak about was my background. As Margaret said, I've worked for several different communities. This is the 5th community that I've worked for. I have 31 years of experience in local government management. I started in Alamosa, Colorado as a county manager and was there for 4 years. And then I went to upstate New York and worked in Monticello, New York for 2 years. It was an interesting community. When I worked there, there was a saying that in Sullivan County, New York, there's only 2 ways out of government. One is to get fired and the other is to get indicted. So I always tell people I took the high road and I got fired. But it was an interesting period of my life because it was, I had great staff, we were trying to do all the right things, and I had a really corrupt board. And they were, the majority of them were removed from office, and then in a special election, the mayor and 2 other people were elected back into office, and I was told that I didn't do enough while they were going through court, and that as soon as he had 3 votes, he was going to fire me. And so, knowing that in New York they run on a partisan ticket, and they run as a team, 3 people got elected with him, and there was a 5-member board. I could do the math, and so it didn't take very long. And then I worked in Sturbridge for 15 years, had a really great time there. It was a wonderful community. Towards the end of that tenure, I actually interviewed here in Lexington when Carl Valenti was hired, and I was runner-up. And so I had a lot of patience, and I waited until Carl was a little older than I am, so he retired. And during that time, I spent a little over 9 years working for the town of Westboro as their town manager. And I was their first town manager in Westboro, which presented a lot of challenges in itself because previously a lot of different boards and committees operated with the department heads where they had a lot of different silos, and all of a sudden all of those silos were put under one person, and a lot of people had to give up what they saw as authority or responsibility, power, or whatever. And basically yield that to a town manager because they wanted to centralize under a professional town manager. And typically, when you're the first town manager, it's about a 2-year job because you do create a lot of enemies, or you have the potential to create a lot of enemies. But I did last there for 9.5 years, and I left basically because I really thought that Lexington was a great career move, and one that I could see that after 31 years would probably be my final career move, and I'm hoping that that's the way it ends up. I also have a bachelor's degree in political science and a master's degree in public administration from the University of Colorado, and that's why I started my career in Colorado. I did 2 internships, and then that led to working as an assistant in the Denver metro area, which then led to being a county manager. At the time, I was the youngest county manager or local government manager in the state's history. When I was hired, I was just 25 years old. And it's funny, I was working for this guy who was a county manager in the Denver metro area, and he encouraged me, actually sort of pushed me for this job. And I expressed my concern that at 25 I didn't think I had the experience to do it, and his response to me was, that county is so messed up that if you fix it, your career will be made, and if you mess things up, people won't blame you because you're just too young. And so I felt that that was a challenge, and luckily things worked out really well there. It was an interesting place to work because I went from a metropolitan, very large organization with about 3,000 or 4,000 employees to a county that was about the size of Rhode Island, had 11,000 people who worked there, or who lived there, and went from having a couple $100 million budget down to about a $15 million budget. So it was a different kind of experience, and I had never really lived in such a rural place in all my life. At one point in my career, I interviewed for the city manager's job in Key West, Florida. And they said, it's a different kind of place to live because you're living on an island. There's nothing close to you. I said, I haven't experienced doing that. I lived in the mountains in Colorado where there was nothing within 150 miles. So, which was kind of a funny side note. Anyway, the other two things I was asked to speak about were some of the short-term issues here and some of the long-term issues here. And so some of the short-term issues that I see is we have a need to develop some standardized policies across the board, some in the areas of personnel management and some in the areas of financial management. We have some unspoken policies and financial, or unwritten policies, not unspoken, unwritten policies when it comes to financial management. And then we have a whole series of written policies for personnel management for the non-unionized workforce, but they're sort of scattered, and they're all individual policies. And Sean Duggan, our public information officer, is here, and I know he was here a few weeks ago, I believe. And he can attest to this. When you get your new employee packet here, it's about 5 inches deep.
Heavy.
It's a very large packet, and so what we really want to do in our HR department starting to work on that is to consolidate that into a comprehensive personnel policy that we can then give to new employees, where consistently everybody knows what our policies are, because I'm still a little bit vague on some of our personnel policies. And I have a separate contract with the town, but for those items that are not dictated by my contract, it says I get the benefits that all other employees get, and I don't know what those are. So I want to find out, though, and so we're going to develop we're in the process of developing a policy. Then we have a number of projects that we're currently working on, including the fire station. Soon we'll have the, hopefully we'll have the center streetscape project, and a project at the cemetery where we'll be building a new building there. So we have a number of projects that are short-term issues. We have labor contracts. When I was hired, we had a number of labor contracts that dated back a few years, and that's sort of, I think Lexington fell into a practice of having their labor contracts a couple of years overdue and then having to pay retroactive pay. I like to have the contracts done 2 or 3 years going forward so that we can clearly budget the costs for all of those. So I've been working as hard as I can with all of our labor unions to get some of those older contracts. We still have 2 that expired on June 30th of 2016 that we're working to not only get them caught up to date now, but also going forward for 3 years. So they're basically end up being 6-year contracts, 2 6-year contracts. The budget, whenever you start a new position in local government, I can tell you that the budgeting process is totally different in every single community. So I've been trying to absorb what we're doing, not making changes to it, and then next year when we do the budget process, any changes that I think need to be made, we'll implement at that point in time. The budget process here is actually very good, and so there probably won't be a lot of changes. In other communities I've worked in, there have been really weak budgeting practices. One of the things that we are doing a little bit different this year is that in the past we were doing a 3-year financial forecast on some things and 5 years on others, and so we've brought it out to 5 years for everything, and we've also taken a look at creating a longer-term debt service scenarios based on all of the projects that we're doing, so that we can know right now when we're making decisions what the impact of those decisions will be 3, 5, 7, and 10 years out. So we're looking 10 years out on debt service forecasting. Staffing, we had a bunch of retirements and resignations over the last 3 or 4 months, and so we have replaced a number of positions, or we've even had new positions such as a public information officer, but we have also had our entire planning department pretty much resigned, and so we have a new planning director, a new assistant planning director, and a new town planner. So we had those 3 positions to fill. We had the health director's position to fill, and our recent retirement of our fire chief. We're in the process right now of recruiting a new fire chief. We met for hours yesterday and cut down 5 finalists down to 3, And then we'll be going forward with an assessment center on March 20th, and hopefully shortly thereafter we'll be making a permanent appointment for the fire chief's position. So we've been doing a lot of hiring, not to mention me too, because Carl Valenti, the former town manager, left last summer, and then I was hired and started on October 1st. The other thing as far as short-term issues go is with a new PIO, Public Information Officer, we're looking at what we can do to improve our communications as far as our town's website and all of the different ways that people communicate now, whether it's Facebook, news media, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever it is. There's a lot of different formats, and the problem is not everybody's using the same format. And there isn't a single format out there, so one of the reasons why the town hired a public information officer is to make sure that we can get information out as best that we can. And I said this at a meeting this morning, we still, even though we're going to try really hard, we will still have people who show up at public meetings and go, I never heard about this. When did this come up? Even though we've been tweeting and Facebook posting and issuing press releases and holding public hearings, it's only so much we can do. And so we're gonna do whatever we can do to get as much information out as possible. The long-term projects that we have include some large capital projects in addition to the fire station, the Hastings School project, and the Lexington Children's Place project. We have a police station project that's slated to come before town meeting this fall and a debt exclusion this fall. And then sometime in the next 2 to 5 years, we anticipate having a high school project that will be coming before the voters, and that'll be really the large project that we are going to have to do a lot of financial planning to sort of limit the impact on taxpayers as much as we possibly can. And that'll take a lot of finagling because it's going to be a very large project. And in fact, our what we're looking at right now, the scenarios are that our debt service costs on an annual basis are about $13 or $14 million. That one project will change it to about $27 to $30 million. So it pretty much doubles it. And so it's going to be a real challenge to manage our finances in such a way that there isn't a huge tax increase all in one year, that we're somehow able to reduce some other costs and have that absorb a portion of the high school debt. And then the last thing is strategic planning. I met this morning with the 2020 committee, and they have done a lot of work in trying to think strategically and long term. I have, in 2 different communities in both Sturbridge and Westboro, participated in long-term strategic plans to help provide a roadmap for the Board of Selectmen on making decisions, especially when it comes to budgets are essentially a 1-year strategic plan. And so if you just go budget year to budget year, you really are kind of treading water. And so by having a strategic plan, it gives sort of a direction, a roadmap of where you want to be, say, 10 years from now, where the community wants to be, and then you drive your budget decisions based on that kind of a roadmap. So those are kind of the long-term, short-term issues as I see them, just real quickly. And I know a lot of people who come to something like this really have questions that they'd like to ask, and so I'm happy to just field questions at this point.
I think I hit the microphone. Right? Thanks, Charles. Hi. Okay, when you go to ask questions, I will run over to you with the microphone because it is being recorded for a future showing on LexMedia. And would you please identify yourself when you ask a question, and I'm heading back over here.
Hi, I'm Margaret Counts-Klebe. I'm actually a town meeting member in Precinct 6, and currently, but not campaigning here. And you know, there's a lot of discussion kind of in the fray from both town meeting members as well as citizens about the Community Preservation Act, about switching the surcharge, about Boston sucking up more of the, you know, match funds. And you know, maybe you covered this earlier, but I'm just curious about your take on this coming in. I assume Westboro had it. I just, you know, curious what you see as the issues around CPA.
Yeah. So Westboro had not adopted the CPA, but in Sturbridge we had. We were actually, I think, the second or third community in the state that had adopted the CPA. And my take on the CPA is there are a lot of different projects that we do and programs that we take on. And a lot of those are not easy, but they have popular support among people generally. I think generally a fire station, especially given the condition of the previous one, people understood and were willing to pay for a new fire station. I think the CPA actually covers those areas that are specific, and I think when it was created, it was done on purpose, that it's much more difficult to get people to say, I want to set aside open space, or I want to do something to preserve a historic document, a historic building, etc., or I want to do something about creating affordable housing. And so the CPA, in my opinion, provides a dedicated funding source for those projects that don't necessarily have the kind of support town-wide to get them approved. And so I think it gives a dedicated funding source and makes sure that we are taking care of some things that have a long-term impact on a community. If you go to communities that have large amounts of open space set aside, and they've had it for years, you know, you walk through there and you go, well, somebody was thinking about this 50 years ago. And if you don't take care of those kind of things, sooner or later you lose a lot of the community character. And so I don't think reducing the CPA surcharge at this point in time is a great idea. I recognize the argument that the state match is not what it once was, but there is a lot of discussion at the legislature right now to look at other fees or increasing some fees that would then increase what the state match is again. I think the state legislature's discussions have been that they would like to see it get back to where it was 50%. And I think that that would only happen for those communities that had the full 3% surcharge.
Frank Sandy, also a town meeting member from Precinct 6. I have a question on property tax assessments and the transfer of the tax burden from businesses to residences. Most existing residential homes, excluding new growth, see significant tax assessment increases each year at a rate much higher than the increases for existing businesses. And the result, what we see is that when businesses sell, business property sells, it's often for much more than the assessed value. What can be done to fix that?
State laws would need to be changed, actually, because there are two different ways that properties are valued. Residential properties are valued based on what's called the market approach. And so what they do is if you have a 3-bedroom, 2-bath colonial house that's 2,000 square feet, it's a mass appraisal system. They find other houses that are similar and that have sold recently, and then that's what they base the value of residential homes on. On commercial properties, they're based on a income approach, and what that is they calculate based on what the potential rental price per square foot would be for that type of building, given whether it's Class A, Class B, Class C office space or retail space, and they figure it out about what it could potentially rent for, and then they develop a assessed value based upon that. And so it's a totally different calculation that's done for either commercial or industrial properties versus residential properties, and it's the way the state law actually dictates that those properties are assessed.
You mentioned that there are two different ways of assessing it, but they're just the two different methods that should come out with the same result if they were accurate. So it would seem to me that the income method is being handled improperly, because commercial buyers also use the income method to determine what they're willing to pay for property, and they come up with much higher values than the town assessors come up with, supposedly both using the income method, because that's what a commercial property buyer is interested in, is what the income is from the property. So why do the assessors come up with a lower value when they use the income method than commercial buyers use?
You know, they use the standardized processes that are set up to develop those values. I can tell you that we get appeals from businesses on the values that are placed on their business properties as well as residential. There's a whole appeals process. If people feel that either their residential property or their commercial property is valued too high or not too low, but if they're valued too high, and people will file appeals on those. So we get them on both commercial and residential.
Hi, Jim. Carla Kale from Artist Senior Living of Lexington. The age-friendly movement is really sweeping a lot of towns and cities, and it's afoot here in Lexington. I wondered if you could just speak to that for a moment.
Yeah, so there are a couple of different things about age-friendly. The first is specifically dealing with the affordability and having people be able to stay in their homes. Once, you know, the fear of most communities is people, once their kids are done in the school system, that they just move out of the community. More people with schools move in, or school children move in. And so one is keeping people in their homes longer. Another item is health care for older residents and how that's provided to them, and how it's provided by our fire department and EMS, how they can help. And then there's a whole issue of dementia friendly as well. And as people age, there are programs that are being created in the state right now that provide specific training for not only municipal governments but also businesses within communities on how to deal with older residents that may be suffering from dementia. So there's a lot of different things, and I know our Human Services Director would be able to speak in a lot more comprehensive manner on some of the programs that we're offering. And so you guys should have her here one day to really speak on that. But it's something that our Human Services Department is working on.
Sean could probably speak better to the. I'm sorry. I'm Pat Costello, Precinct 7, running for re-election, but not campaigning here. Sean could probably speak to this better than I, but the Council on Aging, and I think it's on the Human Services, are having 2 forums on age-friendly. The age-friendly, actually, it's with University of Massachusetts Boston, I believe.
It's March 12th and March 25th.
12th and the 25th. The 12th is in the afternoon at 12:30, I believe, at the community center. The one on the 25th, unfortunately, is the first day or second day of town meeting. It's in the evening, and also will be at the community center.
Yes.
Thank you.
So everything you want to know about age-friendly, you can go to one of those forums.
Well, while people are formulating their questions, I'd like to ask you about the proposed intermunicipal agreement with Minuteman for the playing fields. Where are we at in that?
Boy, so you heard it here first. We'll be probably postponing that action at town meeting this year, at the annual town meeting. I don't feel too bad saying that because I did let the Board of Selectmen know that yesterday. Minuteman made clear to us yesterday that they never intended Lexington to be their sole partner, that they were looking for other partners, and that throws into question not only the fact that our legal use to use the fields would have been limited to 25 years, but whether we would have it from 6 to 10 on weeknights and 8 to 8 on weekends, like we had been negotiating with them, was really going to come forward. And so we're going to be talking about on Monday night, or Tuesday night, I'm sorry, because of the election, at the Board of Selectmen's meeting, and my recommendation to the board will be to postpone that indefinitely at this point in time. And then once Minuteman moves forward, according to them, they have 8 private partners that are looking at the potential for either participating in the fields, potentially building an indoor swimming building, and doing some other things. And so we're going to have to let that play out, which won't play out until sometime in the summer. And so that's obviously going to extend beyond our town meeting. And so there's no way that we could go to town meeting with any kind of a proposal that would be something that I think we should be asking the voters to vote to approve. So we'll be postponing that.
Thank you.
There's news, see?
Yeah.
Find something new.
Glad I'm here today.
Hi there, Grant Carroll, resident. You mentioned the website and you mentioned interest in communicating better with residents in Lexington. I was wondering if you were going to look at the user friendliness from a resident's point of view of the website, because to me it's pretty well organized for government officials, but not so much for residents. One telltale of that is that it has 2 tabs for government, 1 for visitors, and 0 for residents.
Yeah.
Whereas Winchester and Concord, for example, have residence tabs. That's just one measure, but so I was wondering what you might be doing about that.
So one of the things I've done in the past is actually had resident panels play with our website and tell us what they couldn't find and what they could find, and then design changes on our website around that. We are about to go through some changes on our website. We're going to change some of the boxes, trying to make it a little bit more friendly. So
We already did.
Already did?
Yeah.
Okay, it's already done. Because it's one of the questions that a lot of people have is, how do I find how to do this? You know, what do I do about a dog? Where do I get a dog license? How do I not have to, because, you know, what do I do if my dog passes away and I get the bill from the town clerk? There's all kinds of questions people have that our website could actually be a lot more intuitive than it is. And I agree with you. I have a hard time finding things on it, and I keep asking, can we add this? Can we add that? I went to Joe, I'm never going to remember the new name for the where we went that Saturday, and I talked about the website.
iGig.
iGig.
IAL Getting Involved Group.
Yes.
Can you say that again?
iGeek.
iGig. And
It's the Indian blue.
what I was asked to go to speak on was how easy it is for residents to volunteer for boards and committees. And so I thought, I did just kind of what I was saying. I thought, well, I'll just get on the website and see how easy it is for somebody to figure out how to volunteer. And I couldn't. And so I went there and I basically told them that our ability to get residents to volunteer easily to serve on boards and committees is a total failure. And so we have made changes. If you go to the boards and committees page, at the very top of it now, there's a link that says, it says something like, do you want to volunteer for a board or committee? And you click on that, it has a lot of information on boards and committees, and it shows what current openings there are, and we even put a fillable application form, so you can fill the form online and submit it. But you know, there's little things like that that can just be made a lot easier. And so we will continue to work harder at getting our website. And like I said, one of the best things I've done in the past is just have a group of residents come in as a panel and play with the website. You know, tell them, hey, see if you can find this. See if you can find the bylaws. See if you can find out how to get onto LexMedia. I mean, I typically, until I realized that the LexMedia link was on the Board of Selectmen's page, it's not on the home page, I would just Google LexMedia, and that's how I would find it. And then I would go to their page. And so things like that need to be a little bit easier to find, because some people want to watch this. And if they wanted to, they would have to either Google LexMedia or know that it's on a board or committee web page. It's not, the link isn't directly on the home page. So we need to fix things like that.
I want to just we have a bunch of people now want to talk, but anecdotally, I'm on the subcommittee from 2020, which is looking at e-communication, and the co-chairman of the committee just did an interesting thing. He took 10 questions and he looked them up on Google and he looked them up on the town website and he compared the answers. The funniest one of all was one of his questions was, how do I get in touch with the high school principal? And the Google came up with the thing. The town website came up with trash disposal. I'd like you all to meet Sean Dugan. He's our new public information officer. Sean.
So actually last night we were talking about the Google search function, and we're actually exploring an option through Google. The nonprofit and government agencies can actually apply for a custom search engine for free. And so we're looking at integrating that into our current website to sort of make the search functions a little bit more robust. And I agree, when I came here, I interviewed, one of the questions was, what do you think of our website? And I sort of said, I don't know. But I actually designed the website in Concord. So I think having a residence tab and having a lot of those more front-facing things like LexMedia or Code Red or things that people use on a daily basis. We finally got trash and recycling up on the homepage, which is the #1 question that we get, that we receive. So making sure that those functions are available right on the homepage, that it's not 4 or 5 clicks away to get to it, is a top priority for us. So.
Thank you, Sean. You had a question? Yeah. I'll get to you guys. Okay.
Right. I do want to say about that, just last night I was looking, I wanted to get the ballots for all the precincts, so I could look at the ballots for all the precincts, and for the election on Monday, and it was very hard to find. I actually never found it. I was going to go over. I was going Google it. Right, I did. But I was going to go to the town clerk's office when I left here. Okay, I have a totally other question. Being that it's election season here in Lexington for many different offices, and that has brought the whole idea of the high school and the tax burden, which we all know is coming in the not too distant future, and how that could be perhaps modified by the zoning and by commercial around Hartwell Ave, and I'm sure you know what those issues are. So could you just address them?
Yeah. So just in the last couple of weeks, we've had a couple of really good meetings with 2 different business groups. One is smaller businesses that are owned by people who've been in town for a very long time. And the other one is a meeting that we had with business owners who own the buildings basically on Hartwell Avenue, who are around town and would be the type that would be looking at investing in the town, to talk about what it really would take in order for people to have a higher comfort level to make that type of investment. And the main answer is that we need to change our zoning, because our zoning basically requires that if you're developing on Hartwell Avenue, that you need to go to town meeting on a project-specific basis. And so if you have ever dealt with a developer, it basically will cost someone probably $500,000 to $1 million to do a design that they could bring forward for a project that has to go to a town meeting. And the problem is that a lot of people aren't willing to put that kind of money forward and leaving it to a town meeting vote because of the uncertainty involved in that. And so I'm hopeful that as part of the comprehensive plan that we're currently doing, that zoning changes could be made where certain zoning, in certain zones, that some uses would be by right zoning allowances, some would be a special permit requirement, and then some would simply be, these are not things we want in the community, through a long public process where you're trying to find out exactly that. What is it that the community wants? So I think one of the keys is going to be to change the zoning so that, I mean, if you imagine you own a parcel there and you're going to spend $50 to $75 million maybe building a large building, you want some certainty before you start putting forward your own personal capital. But the other thing that's a component of that is, if you are trying to recruit a tenant usually isn't going to say, well, yeah, I'll wait 6 months and leave it up to whether town meeting votes to approve a building that I'm going to be located in. And so it's hard for property owners to lease up their buildings if they don't have that kind of certainty either. So I think that's one aspect of the issue. I think the other aspect of the issue, as far as Hartwell goes, is the traffic impacts that are there. And I think one of the things that Lexington should do, and it's something that I plan on talking with the Board of Selectmen about, is we should really be looking at, when it comes to the traffic impact and how some of that could be funded, is the impact from Lincoln Labs and Hanscom Air Force Base, who don't pay property taxes to the town, and yet they have hundreds, if not thousands, I'm going to say thousands, but I don't want it to sound like tens of thousands, of employees that are creating a large portion of the traffic issues that we have in that area, and yet they're not paying anything towards resolving it. And at this point in time,
Matt
Lincoln Labs...
Please come to the reference desk. Matt Schumann, come to the reference desk.
So if you hear Matt, you need to go. Lost my train of thought. Anyway, so they're not paying towards it, the tax burden, and I think that it raises to a level that we should be approaching our congressional delegation to see whether or not, because we're not going to get a payment in lieu of taxes, and we're not going to get them to agree to do something on an ongoing basis, but there should be some recognition of the impact they're having on the community, and the federal government should step up and do some sort of a project there to alleviate some of the traffic concerns so that we have the ability to do economic development, because one of the things impeding that is the traffic, and it's being created by federal government facilities. They're not paying property taxes to the town. And so I think we need to really put a full court press on our congressional delegation.
I worked at Hanscom. I was paying taxes.
Okay, could you please say who you are?
Arthur Daltus, Dexter Road, and I'm not running for anything. You, I think, alluded to this in your opening remarks. It's maybe, anyway, it's a complex question. I think we're at a kind of a big crossroads for the town. The last few years, we've had a lot of wonderful capital projects. I think, all of them seem logical, smart, they're planned, they're good, but they're big, and there's a lot of them, and they're all stacked up on top of each other. And simultaneously, and therefore as a result, you start seeing these reports that the debt is going to be going up, the rainy day fund's going down, taxes are going up. I think mine went up like 10% a year for the last 3 years, approximately. How do we find the balance in doing these good things for the town, but without bad impact financially?
The answer to that is a long-term answer, and it's developing a longer-term capital plans, recognizing what your capital costs are going to be, and staging projects in such a way that you don't have them all stacked up on one another. And it's difficult right now for the town because we just did that. And it's sort of like if you went out and you bought three brand new cars in your family, all three of them, assuming that you put the same mileage on them, are going to have to be replaced at the same time, instead of buying one this year, one 2 years from now, and another one 2 years later. And so that's one of the things that we're actually, this morning I said that too, one of the things that we had a discussion at our last senior management team meeting is that I want that group to begin talking about long-term capital plans and how we can start putting things together so that we can, at least in the future, start staging things in such a manner that we don't have them all stacked up. The group called Government Finance Officers Association, which is made up of finance directors of local governments all over the country, has a whole series of best management practices, and they actually recommend that communities don't let their debt service drop too low, that there's a minimum level of what your debt service should be and a maximum of what your debt service should be, so that you're not, because what that does, it drives communities into making decisions where you're doing regular replacement of capital. You're not dropping it down to 1 or 2% and then all of a sudden having it jump up to 12 to 14%. And so when I talked earlier about working on developing financial policies. That's the debt management policy is something that will be a key component of that. And so it's not in place now, but it's something that hopefully by the end of summer we've got something that is a policy that the Board of Selectmen, Appropriations Committees, and others can begin looking at and fighting over and figuring out the best way to move forward. But it is very, it's a difficult thing to get your hands on. And I can say in my most recent position, Westboro was in a very similar position where they had ignored a lot of their capital building replacement for a long time. They had large school enrollment growth, and at the same time had a fire station that was more decrepit than the one here. It was actually condemned about 10 years ago as being structurally unsound. And the police station was too small. The town was looking at building a $45 million public safety facility and ignoring a lot of their other buildings. And we sort of put a pause on everything. And we did put together a phased-in plan over a number of years so that debt was coming on and falling off so that you could manage it at about, we set a goal of keeping it at 7%, our debt, total debt burden of our operating budget. And so we phased things. We told people, yeah, we know everybody wants to have a community center. 4 years from now, like 2024, they'll be building a community center in Westboro probably. And in the next 2 years, they'll probably be tearing down the library and putting a new 3-story library up. And so those things were being phased in so that they, when the first year of debt hit, some other debt was falling off of our books so that it stayed level. And so that's really the way we have to sort of really plan that out. It's something that our assistant town manager for finance is already looking at right now as a lead up to putting together some financial policies.
Hi, I'm Melissa Lee, not running for anything either, but I just want to say welcome to you and welcome to Sean. I applaud the town for hiring you. A public information officer, I think, is a great step forward in the town communicating better about issues like this. You know, the question on a lot of the folks I speak to is the high school, and obviously that's one of the major capital projects coming up. The more communication we can do around that in advance, I think the easier it will be for everyone to digest later or to have their voices at least heard. That said, the Lexington Citizens Academy, I just want to put a plug in there. That was a fantastic experience that the town provides to all residents here. It's something that I think we should actually utilize more for these open positions on committees. You should have a listserv from the Lexington Citizens Academy that really serves as a messaging tool. That's just the plug, but thank you very much.
Yeah. I will say that I agree with you entirely that that's a great pool of candidates. In both Sturbridge and Westboro, we had what we called the Citizen Leadership Academy. It was the very same kind of program. In the very last meeting, I always showed up with the committee volunteer form in my hand, and I handed it out to everybody. And in both of those positions, I can say by the time I left, I think in Sturbridge, the majority of my board of selectmen had gone through the Citizens Leadership Academy, and in Westboro, 2 of the 5 current board, 2 of the 5 members have actually gone through it. And so it does
the same here, but I think the follow-up on listservs, Facebooks would be very beneficial.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Frank Sandy again. I'd like to get back to the question of the town website, particularly regarding information on upcoming town elections. When candidates take out papers or return them or withdraw, that information is all posted on the town clerk's bulletin board, but not on the town website. And the only way that residents can find out that information is either by going down to the town office, or occasionally somebody will take pictures of the town clerk's bulletin board and post them on the various listservs. That shouldn't be necessary. That information should be on the town website. This year, one candidate withdrew from the one-year term for selectmen, and one candidate withdrew from the planning board election. That information was not clearly available. It was sure spread around by rumors, and people could eventually find out about it, but that should be immediately on the town website so that everybody knows who's running for what.
I agree. So noted.
And to make it even, yeah, Sean's taking notes. To make it even worse, when I went to the town website, there was no indication on the homepage, or if there is now,
that there was a town election coming up. It wasn't. It was like you had to go into the town
It's under
clerks.
town news. All the specimen ballots and the polling locations
Right.
and all that. That's on the that is on the homepage right now.
Okay, but it didn't used to be. So, you know, you could live your whole life in town, and like I live off of 128, I could go back and forth to work and never know there was a town election ever, because the only sign we put up in town is the one in the center. And if you don't go down to the center on a regular basis, you didn't even see that. So we're working on it. We're working on it, and I think I'm glad this has come up as an issue, because I agree with you. Okay, time for one more question. Oh my goodness. All right. Well, with that, I'm going to thank Mr. Malloy for spending time with us today. It was a pleasure. We learned all about the Minuteman Fields. That was good. We have a couple of announcements. Wouldn't be the league if we didn't have a couple of announcements. Our next First Friday will be here, April 5th, and the Lexington Human Services and Senior Services are coming. I thought of that when you asked your question. On May 3rd, we're going to change our venue quite a bit. We're going to be an evening meeting. That'll be the first Friday in May. And we're having the author, Barbara Berenson, who wrote a book called The Massachusetts in the Women's Suffrage Movement, Revolutionary Reformers. And we're doing that in cooperation with the Lexington Historical Society at the Lexington Depot on that night. I assume it's at 7 o'clock. I haven't seen the time, but just want to remind everyone to vote on Monday. It wouldn't be the league if we didn't say that. And Ingrid has one more thing.
This announcement is from the planning staff. On March 7th, 7 p.m., Estabrook Hall, Carey Memorial Building. The topic is, who will Lexington be? Trends in Lexington's population characteristics and school enrollment for updating the comprehensive plan. Marion Cohen, the Director for Social Research from Framingham State, will be speaking, and Maureen Kavanaugh, Director of Planning and Assessment, Lexington Public Schools, will also be speaking.
What date? March 7th, it's a Thursday. And just to remind you that Marion Cohen was ran the 2020 surveys that we've done 3 of them, but she's the one who analyzed it all and has made several presentations. And those surveys are one of the ways we get ideas about what the priorities are in town. And the Citizens Academy was a 2020 program. I'm making plugs here for 2020. So if that's all, I thank you all. Is there any more snacks back there? And everybody have a good weekend. And don't forget to vote. Bye.